I was in Beyoncé's dressing room, and I saw something that still keeps me up at night. Behind the mirror, I saw another Beyoncé, not just a reflection, but something alive. I know it sounds insane, but I swear on everything I've seen it. A second Beyoncé, waking up, staring right at me. You clicked on this video because you want to know the truth, and I'm about to tell you just how deep this goes. Trust me, you won't look at her the same way after this. The invitation to step into Beyoncé's dressing room was a dream come true. I'd worked behind the scenes at shows before, but nothing could have prepared me for this moment. This was different. This was Beyoncé, the superstar, the icon. I had been working in production for a few years, long enough to see a lot of what went on behind the curtains, but never close enough to the big names, the ones everyone talks about, the ones whose posters fill the walls. I'd seen glimpses of celebrities in their most vulnerable moments, the stress before they hit the stage, the chaos of last-minute prep. But this was different. This was Beyoncé, and this wasn't just a glimpse. I was about to be in her space, alone. I still couldn't quite believe it. The dressing room was tucked away from the rest of the venue, a sanctuary for her before the lights came on. As soon as I stepped through the door, I felt a shift. The atmosphere changed immediately, like I'd crossed an invisible line. The room had a kind of stillness, as though everything in it, the gold-framed mirrors, the designer clothes hanging from racks, the perfect lighting, had been arranged not just for function, but for someone else. It felt almost sacred, too perfect. Every detail was flawless. The air was so clean and crisp, it almost felt as though it was being filtered to perfection. A large, full-length mirror took up one entire wall, reflecting everything back with laser precision. It wasn't just a mirror. It felt like a portal into another world, one where everything was controlled, measured, and immaculately curated. For a second, I felt the weight of the privilege, the uniqueness of the moment. But then I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The room seemed almost too calm, too perfect. I glanced at the clock on the wall, and I could tell she was due to arrive soon, but something in the air had changed. The stillness had grown unsettling. The energy in the room felt too quiet, like the calm before a storm. I didn't want to be caught staring, so I tried to keep my focus on the room's decor. I noticed the designer clothes hanging on a nearby rack. It looked like they were freshly pressed, each outfit precisely placed. But something caught my eye in the reflection. The mirror. That damn mirror. I couldn't stop looking at it. At first it seemed like any other mirror, but it wasn't just the reflection of the room I was seeing. Something was off. I can't explain it. It's like the mirror was more than just a surface. It felt like it was alive, pulling me in, just a little, but I pushed that thought out of my head. Get a grip, I told myself. You're just nervous. This is Beyoncé's dressing room, and you're fine. But as I shifted from one foot to the other, adjusting the tension in my body, I couldn't ignore it. There was something wrong with the reflection. For a moment, I thought it was just the lighting. You know how sometimes the way the light hits something can create a strange optical illusion. But as I looked closer, I realized this wasn't an illusion. The reflection in the mirror was too sharp, too perfect, like it had been polished. But at the same time, it felt unnatural. It wasn't like the other mirrors in the room. It wasn't reflecting the room the way it should have. It was as though There was something else in it. At first, I thought it was just the way the light was bouncing off the surface. Maybe because the room was still. Maybe it was the fact that I was standing alone in a place where no one else had been in a while. But then I saw it. It moved. The reflection wasn't perfectly still. It shifted. Not like a normal reflection should. I can't describe what I saw in words, but I'll tell you this. It wasn't the real Beyoncé. At least not the one I expected. No, this was something else. I thought I was just imagining things. It was just a glimpse, a flicker of motion that shouldn't have been there. But there it was again. A second figure, standing just behind the real Beyoncé's reflection. But it wasn't just a shadow. Number. The second figure was alive. It was moving. Not like a reflection, but as if it was a real physical being, existing in the same space as the real Beyoncé. I quickly looked away, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The mind plays tricks when you're alone, right? I was nervous. The whole environment was overwhelming. But when I turned back toward the mirror, it was still there. The second figure, closer this time. I felt my stomach drop. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just a strange reflection or a trick of the light. This second Beyoncé wasn't mimicking the first one. She was doing something else, something different, something that didn't belong. And that's when I started to panic. I looked around, half expecting someone to walk in and tell me that this was just some bizarre setup for an art project or a prank. But no one came. I was alone. The second Beyoncé in the mirror wasn't just standing still anymore. She was moving, step by deliberate step, but not in the way the real Beyoncé would move. This second version was different, colder. Her movements were sharp, like someone who was waiting for something. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The real Beyoncé wasn't here yet, but I didn't want to be caught standing in front of that mirror, staring at a reflection that felt wrong. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but I couldn't help it. I had to look again. The second Beyoncé. She blinked. It was subtle, but she did. The real Beyoncé hadn't moved an inch, but the second one in the mirror had become more real with each passing second. It was like she was waking up from a deep slumber. At that point, I didn't know if I was in the presence of something supernatural or if I had just cracked under pressure. But I knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary mirror. And it wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was something else. Something alive. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Because just as I was about to leave, the second Beyoncé started to move toward me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. I don't know why I was still standing there, staring at it like some kind of prisoner, but I couldn't move. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a shadow now. She was something real. She was alive in a way that made me question everything. I had to get out of there, but my body wouldn't listen to me. The real Beyoncé, or at least the one I thought was her, was still nowhere to be seen. I could hear the sounds of preparations going on behind the walls of the dressing room, but the air was still, suffocatingly still. Too still. It was like everything was waiting for something, waiting for me to look back at the mirror. The second Beyoncé was no longer standing still. She was moving, each step calculated, deliberate. Her eyes, I swear, her eyes locked with mine, like she knew I was there, watching her. And that's when everything clicked into place. This wasn't just some trick of the light or my imagination playing tricks on me. Number. This was something far darker. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the mirror. Time lost all meaning. I couldn't feel my legs anymore, my hands trembling as I fought to breathe. The second Beyoncé took another step, and I felt my heart pound in my chest like it was gonna burst. She wasn't mimicking the real Beyoncé anymore. Number. She was alive. It was like I had crossed a line I shouldn't have. Like I had stepped into a world I wasn't supposed to see. The reflection, once so harmless, had become something ominous. The second Beyoncé's movements were sharp, cold, and there was something wrong about the way she looked at me. It wasn't curiosity or even the usual confidence you'd expect from someone in her position. Number. There was something darker in her gaze. Something predatory. I blinked, hoping the whole thing would vanish. I told myself, it's just a reflection. Just a trick of the light. There's nothing to fear. But when I opened my eyes again, she was still there, closer than before. Much closer. Now, the real Beyoncé still hadn't entered the room, and I didn't know whether I should feel relieved or terrified. But this wasn't a reflection anymore. She wasn't just standing behind the glass, locked in place like a reflection should be. No. This second Beyoncé was moving around in a way that made the room feel smaller, more suffocating. I had to turn away. I had to look at something else, anything else, but my gaze kept snapping back to her. The reflection, no longer a mere image, felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. This wasn't the Beyoncé the world knew, the one who danced, sang, and smiled for the camera. This version, the second one, was darker, colder, like something was broken inside her. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. But she wasn't just a reflection. She was a presence, a force in the room that was slowly seeping into my bones, tightening around my chest. I tried to break the trance, to pull myself away, but I couldn't stop looking at her. She was still moving in the mirror, her eyes following me as though she knew exactly what I was thinking. She wasn't mimicking the real Beyoncé's movements anymore. No, she was doing something else, something I couldn't quite understand. Something unnatural. I felt the cold air in the room pressing in on me. My breaths came in shallow gasps, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't look away from her. The reflection, the second Beyoncé, wasn't just watching me anymore. She was moving toward me. I stepped back instinctively, but she matched my movement, her eyes still locked on mine. The room, once full of anticipation and excitement, now felt empty, hollow. The silence was thick, a silence that felt unnatural. I wanted to scream, to call out for someone, but my voice was trapped in my throat. But still, she moved, and with each step she took in the mirror, I felt myself backing up further, the room feeling more cramped, more confined, like it was closing in around me. It wasn't just her movement that disturbed me, it was the energy. There was something wrong in the way she moved. She didn't just exist in the mirror, she belonged there. Like she had been waiting for me to notice her, to see her. I glanced toward the door, wondering if I could just leave, run out of the room and pretend none of this had happened. But no, my feet wouldn't move. My eyes were locked on her, She was so close now, standing right in front of the glass. But somehow, I knew she wasn't confined to the mirror anymore. She was in the room with me. And then, it happened. The reflection wasn't a reflection at all. It shifted. Her body turned, and I swear to you, she moved independently, as if she was alive. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This was no longer a trick of the light, no longer an optical illusion. This was something real. Something that had crossed over from the other side of the mirror. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, my heart racing in my chest as the second Beyoncé stepped forward, still staring at me, her eyes cold and full of something I couldn't quite place. And then she smiled. But it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was cold. It was like a challenge, a dare. It was like she was inviting me to come closer. My body screamed for me to turn away, to leave, to run. But I couldn't. I couldn't escape the pull of her gaze. The second Beyoncé, the one that wasn't supposed to exist, was real. And she was waiting for something. Waiting for me. But just as I felt myself getting pulled toward the mirror, something stopped me, because that's when I heard it. The voice of the real Beyoncé. Soft, distant, and it wasn't just a warning, it was a command. The second Beyoncé's smile wasn't just unsettling, it was unnerving. It was like she knew something I didn't. It was as if she was standing there, waiting for me to make my move. But what was I supposed to do? I had never felt more trapped in my life. Her eyes never left mine. She stood just on the other side of the mirror, close enough that I could almost reach out and touch the glass. But the closer I got, the more I realized this wasn't just a reflection. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't some trick of the light or a figment of my imagination. No, this was something else. I felt the room getting colder. The warmth I had felt when I first stepped in had completely disappeared. A chill crept over my skin, and the silence became suffocating, like I was stuck in some warped version of reality. I tried to take a deep breath, but it was as though the air itself had thickened. I could barely breathe. For a second, I considered running. But where would I go? I couldn't even move. My legs were frozen in place, and my body felt like it was being pulled toward the mirror. There was no way out. As I stood there, barely able to move, I realized something even more. Horrifying. The mirror wasn't just showing a reflection anymore. The second Beyoncé wasn't mimicking the movements of the real one. She was doing her own thing now. Her eyes, still locked on mine, began to narrow. There was something predatory in her gaze. I tried to convince myself that I was just imagining it, that this was some trick of the mind, an optical illusion, or some kind of twisted dream. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't normal. It wasn't just a reflection. It was as if the second Beyoncé was standing in the same room as me, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. The worst part? She wasn't just still. She was moving. Her head tilted slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw her lips move, but no sound came out. No words, just the slow, deliberate movement of her body, her eyes never leaving mine. I took a hesitant step back, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The mirror seemed to pull me in, like it was calling me, begging me to come closer. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. I leaned forward, and then that's when I saw it. Her hand. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, an image in the glass. But then I saw her fingers twitch, I'm not talking about a flicker or a slight movement. I mean, she moved her fingers, and I could feel it. I could feel her presence, her power reaching out from the mirror. I jerked back, my heart racing. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was real. She was real. I thought about screaming, about calling for someone, but the words got caught in my throat. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a shadow in the mirror anymore. She was alive. Her hand was now pressing against the glass, but it wasn't like a normal reflection. The glass didn't bend, didn't warp. It was smooth. It was like her hand was just there, like it was inside the mirror with me, but not. My breath caught in my chest as the mirror shifted. The light in the room flickered, and I felt the air grow even colder. I felt the cold on my skin, biting into me like icy fingers. I couldn't pull myself away. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. Then, just as I thought I couldn't stand it any longer, I heard something. It wasn't the voice of the real Beyoncé. It was a whisper, soft but unmistakable. The voice from the other side of the mirror. Don't listen to her. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. But what did it mean? Was it the real Beyoncé speaking? Or was it the second one? The second Beyoncé's gaze never left me, and she smiled again. It wasn't a smile of comfort or warmth or anything familiar. No, it was a smile of pure coldness. It was like she had won, like I had already fallen into her trap, and now there was no escape. For a split second, I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. I wanted to pretend this never happened, that I was just some paranoid idiot who had let his mind get the best of him. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't my imagination. This was real. And I wasn't the only one in that room anymore. The reflection in the mirror had shifted. The second Beyoncé wasn't just standing there. She was alive. I didn't know how to explain it, but she had crossed over. She wasn't just a reflection. She was something more. I could feel the air growing heavier, like the room was closing in on me, suffocating me. The silence was oppressive. My thoughts were jumbled, racing, but nothing could make sense of the situation. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt dizzy. I turned my head to glance at the door, but it felt like too much to even consider leaving. What was waiting for me outside? Would anyone believe me? Would they think I was crazy? Could I even explain what I had just seen? As I stared back at the mirror, the second Beyoncé moved. Her hand lifted from the glass, and she stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, her foot landed on the floor with a soft thud, and I could feel the room grow even colder. She was coming closer, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know why she was there or what was happening. But I knew one thing. I was in danger. And this wasn't just a game anymore. As the second Beyoncé stepped closer, the room seemed to shrink. I didn't know if I was about to lose my mind or if something far darker was at play. But one thing was for sure. This was just the beginning. I thought I could escape the grip of the mirror, but I was wrong. The second Beyoncé's eyes never left me. They followed my every movement, tracking me as though she was reading my thoughts, anticipating my next move. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to control me, trying to make me do something, anything, to bring her out of the mirror and into the world. I glanced at the door again. The hallway beyond was empty, but the thought of leaving seemed impossible. It was as if the room itself was pressing in on me, trapping me in place. The air was thick, like something had shifted, something dark had taken over. My chest tightened, each breath a struggle. I knew I needed to leave, but the second Beyoncé wasn't giving me a choice. She was pulling me in, and I couldn't fight it anymore. Her reflection was alive in a way that no normal reflection should be. I had seen her move before, but now it was more than that. It was like she was more real than the real Beyoncé, more powerful. It wasn't just her eyes that captivated me anymore. It was her presence. The mirror had become a gateway, and the second Beyoncé was the one on the other side, alive and waiting. I couldn't stop thinking about what the real Beyoncé had said earlier. Don't listen to her. She's not me. But it was too late. The second Beyoncé had already marked me. She had already made me her focus. With each passing second, the mirror felt more like an invitation. It wasn't just a glass reflecting reality anymore. It was something darker, something that shouldn't exist. The second Beyoncé wasn't just mimicking the movements of the real one. She was pushing through, breaking free of the glass and waiting for me to fall deeper into her world. I stepped back, but the space around me seemed to close in. The walls felt closer, and the air seemed to thicken with a cold, unsettling pressure. It was suffocating. The silence was unbearable, but the second Beyoncé was still there, watching. I couldn't escape the feeling that the real Beyoncé, the one who had entered the room so confident, was already gone. The version standing in front of me, the one staring out from the mirror, wasn't her anymore. It was something else, someone else. I didn't know how to explain it, but I felt like I had stepped into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And then, as if to confirm my growing fear, the second Beyoncé's lips parted slightly, but no sound came. She didn't have to speak. Her presence said everything. It was a challenge. It was a warning. I was standing at the edge of something far darker than I was prepared for. I felt trapped. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the second Beyoncé was still there, waiting. I could feel her watching, waiting for me to make the next move. But what I didn't realize in that moment was that the mirror wasn't just pulling me in, it was holding me captive. The second Beyoncé wasn't the only thing waiting. Something else had been lurking behind the glass all along, and now I was about to find out exactly what it was. I couldn't look away from the mirror. It was like my entire world had shrunk down to that one spot, that one reflection. The room around me seemed to blur, as if it didn't matter anymore. All I could see, all I could focus on, was the second Beyoncé. Her eyes, still locked on mine, made it feel like she was reaching into my very soul. I couldn't escape her. I couldn't move. She was so close now. I didn't know how to explain it, but the space between us was vanishing. It was like she was slipping through the mirror, seeping out into the room with me. Each time she moved, the boundaries between the real world and the reflection got blurrier. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but I couldn't even force my legs to move. I was frozen, stuck in place by some unseen force. For the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I wasn't just in a room with a reflection anymore. The second Beyoncé was here, in the room with me. She was alive, and the mirror no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a door, and she was stepping through it. Her presence was suffocating. Every part of me screamed to turn away, to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I was trapped, not by the walls of the room, but by her presence. She was too real. She was no longer a reflection. She was something else entirely, something I couldn't explain. My mind was racing, but I couldn't make sense of it. Was I dreaming? Was this some kind of psychological break? Or was something far more sinister happening? I glanced toward the door again, but there was no way out. There was no way to escape what was happening in that moment. The second Beyoncé in the mirror wasn't just watching me anymore. She was moving, slowly, deliberately, closer. She took a step forward, and the room seemed to shift with her. The air was thick, heavy, like the space itself was growing tighter, closing in on me. I could feel the pressure around my chest, my throat tightening, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything except stare. Then, as if everything had been building to this point, the second Beyoncé spoke. It wasn't a voice that came from her mouth. It was a voice that came from the mirror, from everywhere. It was like the reflection had suddenly taken on a life of its own, and now it was alive. "You're not supposed to be here." The words echoed around me, reverberating in the walls of the room. The sound of her voice cut through the thick silence like a knife. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't even harsh. It was calm, almost empty. But there was something deeply unsettling about it. Something that made every inch of my skin crawl. The calmness in her voice made it worse. It was like she wasn't threatening me. She was simply stating a fact. I staggered back, but my feet wouldn't obey. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was too tight. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Her smile widened just a little, but it wasn't reassuring. It wasn't comforting. It was as if she had already won, like she knew she had control of everything in that room. And now, she was just letting me realize it. Her eyes never left mine, and that feeling, the one that I had been trying to shake off since the moment I stepped into the room, returned with full force. She was waiting for something. But what? I could feel the weight of her gaze pressing down on me, like it was breaking me down, making me question everything I knew about reality. It was like I wasn't looking at a person anymore. I was looking at something other, something that didn't belong. "You shouldn't have looked." The words hit me harder than anything else. They felt like an accusation, a warning, a final sentence. And I couldn't tell if they were meant for me or if they were meant for someone else, someone who had been standing in that room before me. I didn't know, but I knew I didn't want to find out. But it was too late to back away. The mirror, the second Beyoncé, her smile, everything was pulling me in. It was as though I was no longer in control. I wasn't just looking at a reflection. I was staring at something real, something alive. The air seemed to grow thicker with every breath, every heartbeat. The mirror wasn't a mirror anymore. It was a window, a gateway, and she was coming through. I had no idea what she wanted or why she was there. But whatever it was, it felt like I had crossed a line. A line that once crossed, there was no going back. And now that I knew too much, I was about to pay the price. Her smile stretched wider, Welcome to my world. But what I didn't understand in that moment was that this wasn't the end. The real question wasn't who she was. The question was what she was and what she had planned for me next. I had no idea how long I stood there frozen, staring into the mirror. It felt like hours, maybe even longer, but I couldn't look away. The second Beyoncé, she wasn't just a reflection anymore. She was here. She was real, and she had crossed over, stepped into the same world I inhabited. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I thought it was all some twisted dream, but everything about the situation told me it wasn't. The air around me was thick, and with each breath, it felt harder to inhale. My chest tightened, the panic rising in my throat. I was caught between two worlds, the real one and this one, the one behind the glass, the one that felt like a dream but wasn't. Her presence was suffocating. It wasn't just that she was watching me. It was the way she made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be here, like I was intruding on something I had no right to witness. The way she smiled at me, that cold, calculated smile, it made me feel small, helpless. For a split second, I tried to step back, but my legs felt like they were glued to the floor. I couldn't escape her gaze. I couldn't tear my eyes away. She was drawing me in, like gravity had shifted, and I was trapped in her orbit. I tried to move, to scream, but my body wouldn't listen. I was paralyzed. All I could do was look. The second Beyoncé didn't move, but the weight of her stare was like a physical force. It was as if her presence was pressing down on me, pushing me into the ground, suffocating me with the heavy silence that hung in the air. I had never felt more alone, more isolated than in that moment. There was no one else in the room, no one to help me, no one to pull me out of the nightmare I had stumbled into. It was just me and this thing. And that's when I realized the truth. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a reflection. She was a separate entity, an entirely different version of her, one that had been hiding, waiting to be uncovered. This wasn't just about a physical mirror. It was about who she was, or rather, who she had become. The version of Beyoncé that the world saw, the one who performed on stage, was the one we were allowed to see, the polished, perfected version. But the one behind the mirror, she wasn't that. She was something darker, something untouched by the fame, the performance, the mask. It was like I was seeing two versions of her, two separate beings who shared the same body, but who were so different, they could hardly be the same person. The real Beyoncé, the one everyone loved and adored, was one side of the coin. The second Beyoncé, the one in the mirror, was the flip side. The side we weren't supposed to see. The side that breathed beneath the surface, waiting to break free. I didn't know how it was possible, or if it even made sense, but I understood one thing clearly. Both of them were real. The public Beyoncé was the mask, the illusion, the one who performed for the world. But the second Beyoncé, she was the raw, untapped reality. And both versions were trapped in the same body, in the same life, fighting for control. I felt the tension building in the room, the suffocating sense that something was about to snap. It was like the air was thickening with the weight of this truth, pressing down harder and harder until I thought I might suffocate from it. The second Beyoncé was more alive now, her presence more real than the polished image I had always admired. I felt the shift, the pull, and the dread that came with realizing I had uncovered something I shouldn't have. She wasn't just a reflection. She was real. The longer I stared, the more I understood that this wasn't just a metaphor. The two versions of Beyoncé, the two sides of her, they weren't just in conflict with each other, they were fighting. She was trying to keep this part of herself hidden, buried behind the polished mask of the woman we saw on stage. But the mirror, it had pulled her out. It had given her a voice, a presence. And now, she was trying to break free. The second Beyoncé took a step closer, the glass between us seeming to distort slightly, like it wasn't even there. Her eyes never left mine, and I could feel the pull of them, like I was being drawn into something I couldn't escape. I wasn't just looking at her, I wasn't just seeing her. I could feel her in my chest, in my bones, like she was inside me. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand there, unable to move, unable to scream, trapped between the two versions of Beyoncé. It was like I was witnessing the collapse of her identity, a war between who she was and who she had become. And I realized then that the worst part wasn't the fear, the terror of seeing her. It was the fact that I was seeing a side of her that no one else ever had. This wasn't just a reflection. This wasn't just a second version of her. This was the real Beyoncé, the one that had been buried beneath the fame, the performances, the mask. And now, she was breaking free. But as I stood there, I couldn't help but wonder, which version of Beyoncé was the real one? As the mirror began to shift and warp before my eyes, I realized the truth was much darker than I ever imagined. The mirror wasn't just a reflection, it was a prison. And the second Beyoncé wasn't alone in there. Something else was waiting. And it was coming for me. I had to get out of that room. I knew it. Every part of me screamed for me to run, to leave, to get as far away from the mirror as possible. But I couldn't. The second Beyoncé was still there, still watching me, her gaze so intense that it felt like it could burn through my soul. I wanted to move, to scream, but my feet were stuck in place, frozen to the floor. I looked at the door again, praying for someone to walk in, to interrupt this nightmare. But the room was still empty. And the longer I stood there, the more I realized I wasn't going to be able to leave. Not until I understood what was happening. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a reflection. She was more than that. She was the part of Beyoncé that the world didn't know, the part that no one ever saw. The more I thought about it, the more it terrified me. It was like the mirror had become a prison, a place where a darker version of Beyoncé was trapped, waiting for someone to find her. And now, that someone was me. As much as I wanted to turn away, to ignore what was happening, I couldn't. I had seen too much. I had witnessed something that couldn't be explained away. Something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I couldn't just pretend it was nothing. I couldn't pretend that there wasn't a second Beyoncé, a darker, more dangerous version of the woman I had admired for years. What was it about the second Beyoncé that had drawn me in so completely? What was it about her presence that made it impossible to tear my gaze away? Was it her eyes, her smile? Or was it the fact that I had uncovered something that was never meant to be seen? I looked back at the mirror, and the second Beyoncé was still there. She hadn't moved. She was standing still, but I could feel her energy. She was waiting for something, waiting for me to make my next move. And every instinct in my body told me to run, to leave this nightmare behind. But I couldn't. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. I stepped closer to the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. The closer I got, the more I felt the pull of her gaze. It was like she was drawing me in, making it impossible to look away. I could feel the tension in the room, the air thick with something I couldn't quite put into words. It was suffocating. I didn't know if I was ready for what I was about to uncover, but I knew I had no choice. I couldn't leave the room without understanding the truth. I couldn't walk away from this without knowing what was real, what was false, and who the real Beyoncé was. The second Beyoncé had shown me a side of her I had never imagined, and now I needed to know. Was she the real Beyoncé, or was she just a reflection, a mirror image of someone I would never truly know? I stood there, face to face with the mirror, with the second Beyoncé staring back at me. I felt like I was in a trance, unable to look away. My body was shaking, my heart racing, but I couldn't move. I couldn't turn away. The mirror had become a prison, and the second Beyoncé was its warden, waiting for me to acknowledge her, to accept her as the true version of the star I had worshipped for years. But that question kept echoing in my mind. Which one is the real Beyoncé? Was it the Beyoncé we all knew? The one who dazzled on stage? The one who graced magazine covers? The one everyone loved and admired? Or was it the one in the mirror, the one who had been hidden away all this time, waiting for someone to notice? The one who was alive in ways that the public Beyoncé could never be. I realized then that I was staring into a mirror that didn't just reflect my image. It reflected the truth, and the truth was unsettling. The second Beyoncé wasn't a reflection. She wasn't a shadow. She was a person, a being, and she wasn't confined to the mirror anymore. She was breaking free, step by deliberate step, like a ghost that had been trapped in a room for years, finally allowed to walk free. But what did that mean? Was she the true Beyoncé? Was this the version of her that had been hidden away? The one who wasn't bound by fame or perfection? Or was she simply a twisted version of the real Beyoncé, a reflection that had become something much darker? I didn't know. I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I was trapped in this room with no way out. I was staring at something I couldn't explain, something that made my skin crawl and my heart race. And then, as I stood there, unable to move, I felt the room shift. The second Beyoncé didn't just stand there anymore. She moved toward me, slowly, deliberately, like she was coming for me. Her smile widened, and I realized then that I was no longer looking at the real Beyoncé. I wasn't looking at the version of her that the world knew and loved. I was staring at something else, something that had been hidden away, locked behind glass for far too long. The mirror had shown me the truth, but it was a truth that I wasn't ready to face. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a reflection. She was alive, and now she was coming for me. Final payoff. The mirror wasn't just a reflection anymore. It had become a doorway, a portal to something far darker. The second Beyoncé wasn't just a reflection of the star the world knew. She was alive, and now she was coming for me. Her presence was suffocating, pulling me in deeper with every step she took. I knew there was no escaping it. As I stared at her, I realized the truth. The second Beyoncé wasn't just the hidden side of her. She was the real one. The one who had been waiting, locked away behind the glass for someone to notice. I tried to scream, to move, but it was too late. I had already crossed the line, seen too much. The truth was out, and now I was trapped in the mirror, in her world, and I was terrified that I would never make it out.